Well, what a name for a game. Exploitation. Although, to be fair, that is exactly what you do within the game, exploiting various different resources, regardless of whether that's people or other more natural resources found around the environment. Now, what caught my interest with this is that it's not just the normal sandbox survival game, but it's also heavily intermixed with a very heavy dose of management. This is a complex management system going on here that not only involves the oversight of resources and finances, but it's also the navigation of interdepartmental operations. And this is something the game drops on you right from the initial setup. Players are required to put in your personnel details, that's for personal details such as name and age, which then tie into the company's management interface. In short, you might think you've seen it all before when it comes to a game like this, a survival sandbox where you go out and collect various different resources, but it seems to me that this is going to be something quite different. Largely because of the very heavy management overlay system that the game appears to have. Now the gameplay appears to revolve around three main phases. You've got reconnaissance, resource exploitation, and establishment. Reconnaissance is about discovering new planets and resources using the vehicles, the various different machines that exist within the game. Resource exploitation, a little bit more obvious. This involves harvesting resources whilst managing environmental hazards. And then there's establishment, and this is about colonizing the worlds and then securing the corporate dominance over them. So as you might imagine, it's still very, very early days for this game, and as you saw, I think probably on the footage already, that some of this footage is pre-early assets, so the assets that we're seeing right here are not necessarily the ones that will be in the final game. There's also a fair bit of grey boxing footage throughout the entire clip here, and really what this tells me is that they're announcing this game a little bit earlier than you might otherwise expect, a little bit earlier than we normally see when it comes to these type of games. Now there's no early access period just yet, you can't go out and purchase this game. Instead, what the developers wanted to do was give people a glimpse of what they can expect to see. So, obviously, that comes with all the usual caveats with this type of thing, a few of which are, yes, the game does have a lot of potential, but also, there's nothing to actually play yet, no guarantees that this is going to come out, and if it does come out, no real solid guarantee just yet that it's going to be exactly what they're showing. The other side of the token here, though, is that right now, the developers are showing us exactly what they're planning and how it looks right now at this stage of development, and it looks pretty nice. So let's talk about those three phases, starting with the exploration phase. The purpose here is to discover and identify various different resource deposits on the alien world that you've adopted, that you've started on, and you've got a variety of tools and machines to do this. So those tools include scouts, which are humanoid machines, some of them can actually be human, and these explore dangerous and uncharted lands down on the surface of the planets. You've then got EVMs, extra vehicular machines, and these are used to cover the terrain much faster. You've got the Trailblazer rover. This is a fast all-terrain rover built for the harsh environments that you're going to find yourselves in. And in this, you'll notice that you use sonar-like vibrations to provide visual feedback on the ground to locate the resources you're after. Now, the technology, the sonar, will give you a bit of an idea of what direction to head in and roughly how far you've got to travel. Another EVM looks somewhat like a mech. You can travel over pretty much all surfaces here except the devs say deep water. And when it comes to the scanning process itself, currently the developers are showing this as a QTE, a QuickTime event. Resource extraction phase is obviously going to be an important one, and this sort of happens separate to the other phase, the exploration phase, and you're going to need to put a beacon down on the node, the resource that you've discovered, head back to your base, and then pick up another vehicle to head on over and extract these resources. So in the exploitation phase, players are going to have the ability to construct buildings on the discovered planets, and these constructions facilitate the extraction of the resources from the deposits that have been identified during the exploration phase. Now, the interesting part here is that extracting these resources looks like it's going to be pretty aggressive. It's depicted that way, and there's an emphasis on maximizing resource extraction. However, this activity comes at the cost that exploiting the resources to their limits might damage or even destroy entire ecosystems on these alien worlds. So that means that resource extraction is tied into the game's overall economy, and you're probably going to need to strike a balance here depending on how you want to play. There is going to be financial consequences depending on whether you extract enough resources or perhaps even damage the world itself. The third phase is establishment. This is colonization. So to build and develop human settlements here on the world, as well as corporate infrastructure, you do need to lay claim to this, and thereby extending the company's influence and reach over the world or the section of the planet that you've or declared your own, or that you've claimed. So in this phase, as a player, you're going to have the opportunity to establish bases on the world, and this involves creating environments where people can settle, thereby attracting individuals who seek a better future and a better life for themselves. The developers say there will be a governmental framework to this, so players are going to have to learn how the government operates, and they can have an effect on this by being, well, you're a corporation and you can learn how to politically lobby the government, thereby bending laws in the company's favour. Players are also going to have to navigate the off-world market to sell their resources at the best prices. Developers have also said there's some other elements to this particular phase, such as the option to spy on competitors, undertaking narrative-driven contracts from rival companies, and the potential to improve relationships with some competitors who may back the player in the times of attack. Because yes, as you're extracting resources, some other companies might not take that too favourably. They may come after you, especially if you've encroached on territory they either own themselves or they have plans for. Over time, the colonization phase is linked with the larger star map, which is going to allow players, the company, to broaden their reach across multiple star systems. As you can see, it really does feel that Exploitations is taking a somewhat different approach to what you'll typically see with this type of what would usually be called a survival sandbox game. They're looking at a very different approach here, at least as far as I can tell. Now, there is another layer here, that's the management and operational oversight, and this is a part that I really do feel kind of stitches everything together. So the entire operation of all of this is managed from a centralized command system which is accessible to the player. This starts at the beginning of the game, as we mentioned, where the player is introduced to a dashboard that displays all the critical information, such as company capital, staff allocation, because you can allocate and deallocate staff across various different departments, and then the current resources that you have in storage. So it's an interface that's organized with several menus, and that includes human resources, contracts, logistics, and the off-world market. And all of these allow the player to monitor resource values, track competitor actions, and manage operational expenses. This appears to be all located in the space station headquarters. The management of these operations is conducted from that space station. So yeah, you have two sides to this game. The management section, which is done from the space station and has many of the traditional elements you would expect from a management game. And then you have the section down on the planetary surfaces, where you're going out and doing many of the hard work elements directly yourself. So there is a lot behind Exploitation. There's a few other gameplay elements I haven't quite touched on yet, but if you do want a real heavy deep dive, then do check out the developer diary that was released just a few days ago. I'll link this in the video description, and then also talk a little bit about the game's lore there for you in case you're interested in that as well. But right now, this one is looking pretty interesting, and I'm very curious to hear more about this game. No idea yet when we can expect to see release, but as this appears to be in very early development, it's likely that the game is a fair way off. We'll have to see how it all goes. At any rate, thanks for watching this video all the way through. There is another one on the screen right here if you want to check that out. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.